In Albert Camus' surrealist and existentialist work, The Stranger, Meursault is a regular man who lives in an unreal world where his humanity is questioned because he does not cry at his own mother's funeral, and he is brought to trial due to his intense reaction to heat that leads him to shoot and kill a man. Meursault is an example of existentialism to the maximum, and his character is a reflection of the French author Camus himself. Camus lived in between the period of World War I and World War II, and wrote The Stranger prior to World War II breaking out. In the last few chapters, Meursault is legitimately screaming at a priest, arguing about what is the true meaning and point of life. Meursault is suffocated by society and is saved by nature when the cooling feeling of the stars hits him prior to his execution. Camus' story of a man who is most comfortable in his thoughts and least comfortable when bothered by a pointless society is an example of surrealism in literature between the two world wars. Camus' writing was revolutionary in his ability to depict subconscious emotions in text. This surprisingly short book is able to communicate immense surrealism that was unheard of during his time, but was shortly continued by others with similar concerns of society, such as George Orwell's 1984. This was a stark contrast to the previously known works, such as The Hobbit, during the 1930s. The desire to reach into a subconscious for an escape from reality and a suffocating and frustrating society carries over to the visual arts, and similarly challenges the status quo of artwork. Surrealism within sculpture was creating an object with seemingly no narrative but an ability to influence the unconscious. For example, Alexander Calder's mobiles create a light balance out of organic shapes to mimic real objects, like the lobster trap in the fishtail. The organic shapes give the vague image of a fishtail on the upper left, a class of fish on the bottom left, and a cage to the right. The class of fish and the cage are in a delicate angle, precariously balanced but not actually balanced, and leaning towards the fish. The fish individually are also leaning in a strange angle as well. The fish individually looked like simple shapes, but altogether looked almost primal and almost like a backbone structure. In another work titled The Lace of Your Painties, the shapes are organic yet pointed like stretching fabric. Calder manages to create a waistline effect by the overall shape created by the delicately balanced shapes. Surrealist objects are meant to jolt the unconscious, often of thoughts people are meant to feel ashamed of by society, such as violent or sexual thoughts. This sculpture is a perfect example of how the title and the sculpture achieve that, but there's nothing inherently sexual or lewd about the piece. It's simply floating shapes. But the sculpture is meant to take the viewer's subconscious hold and let them perceive something that might be violent or sexual. The surrealists were not alone in their challenge of the status quo. Walter Gropius was part of the Bauhaus school of design that explored the combination of design and engineering. To us nowadays, it's a no-brainer. Design is functional, and good design makes sense compared to nonsensical design. But at the time, the combination of functional design and artwork was jaw-dropping in the time of intense machinery. The Bauhaus school wanted to make artists engineers and engineers artists. Bauhaus combined fine arts and applied arts. Conservative members of the Weimar Republic did not see the point in the school, which was a state school meant to revitalize education in post-World War I Germany. The simplicity of geometric shapes found a new praise in the Bauhaus, which is seen in the architecture of the building for the Bauhaus school. The building itself was meant to match the creative flow of the students. The flat roofs and the weightlessness of the geometric block is created by unadorned shapes. Since there's limited decoration, the mass of the building appears to float atop the ground, giving an airiness rather than a dense mass. The simple geometry of the building gives it an artistic appeal, while a coherent design to make a large volume space for the maximum amount of classrooms. The entirety of the Bauhaus was fueled by the desire to emphasize the sleek design of simple shapes. The inspiration for these simple yet elegant, weightless shapes come from the High Modernist movement. Prior to this new movement focused on the machinery and design. The High Modernist movement was not simply an artistic movement, but a belief in rationalism, which regards all reason as the chief source and test of knowledge, and has a limited focus on emotion, and more focus on certain truths that explain surroundings. This is a high contrast from Romanticism, for a more calculated and realistic understanding of the world around yourself. While the grounded belief of the Bauhaus seemed to contrast from the emotionally focused world of surrealism, they both made sense in a way. At the time, the world just ended what had been thought to be the worst world war possible. Weapons used were more massively destructive than ever before. The theories of the Bauhaus let people ground themselves and understand knowledge based on nature and their own surroundings. The theories of the surrealists climbed into their own subconscious mind to find solace and explanation for life. The tense times that these artists lived in resulted in protest against the status quo of art because the artwork no longer matched the times they were living in. Similarly to the times we currently live in, people will find different approaches for the tense world we live in and explain it with the artwork words cannot say.